Okay, we're going to try to be electronic. I didn't turn it off. Tom, are you ready? This is Tom Beck. He's a special assistant that helps with communications. We also have with me Thomas Madden, who's the head of our economic development. He is he's our entire economic development staff. He does a great job. We also have a table over here called City of Stamford. And I'll just say briefly, and I'm not going to introduce everybody because there's more to come. And we have Ted Jankowski, who's Director of Public Safety, and Fountain, who is the Director of Health, Ellen Brownlee, who is our Social Service Leader, Kathy Emmett, who is our Legal Beagle, and Cindy Grafstein, who's Special Assistant for Education. The rest of you I will embarrass later. In any event, it is a great pleasure to be here again since last year to share what I see in the city of Stamford with the Chamber. I want to thank Jack Conlon and all of the members for inviting me here today and putting on this event. Last year I did share my reflections after a few months in office and shared my priorities for the first year. A lot of learning in that year, a lot of changes, a lot of dynamics, but I want to share some of those highlights and share my vision for some of the things which are coming ahead in the coming year. So first, that's us. I am proud to report that from where I sit, the state of our city is strong and growing stronger each day, and it continues to be rated as one of the best places to live in Connecticut. And for all the challenges that I talk about, or you talk about, and some of the concerns and fears and nervousness, we are on top. We've been on top, we will stay on top, and continue to be on top. There's four traits, or four different areas that I want to talk today, and why I say we're a strong city, and why we in fact a great city. And I will talk about those first. We are financially sound as a city. We have an incredibly safe city. We are a livable city with a very high quality of life. And quite frankly, I think the future of Stamford is very bright. So let me talk about those. These are kind of the ingredients. Let me talk about each one of these. In terms of financially sound, for all the things we want to do, and you guys are all business people, so you know this, you don't have the financial resources to come to this. And so that is clearly one of the things that we have to do. And it manifests itself for the city in how we do our budgeting, how we effectively spend that budget, and how we keep our costs under control. Unfortunately, previous short-term budget and service cuts have not achieved long-term savings. And in many cases, they've actually had a counterproductive effect of increasing future liabilities. While those old future liabilities are now today's current liabilities. It is my goal to address this fundamental cost structure issue moving forward. Tackling the city's long-term cost structure is not a popular goal, it's not the easiest goal, and certainly it isn't the quickest thing to do in a year, but it is absolutely necessary and critical to the long-term sustainability of Stamford City government. First of all, we do continue with our AAA rating. Standards and Poor's. We in fact were in rating calls here in the last couple of days. That is the highest rating, and it is Stamford is the only city, and cities have populations over 100,000. We're the only city in the state of Connecticut that has a AAA rating. The state of Connecticut does not have a AAA rating. And, this AAA rating is thrown around like a soundbite, and I don't think a lot of people really understand the importance of it. But it saves the city millions of dollars in funding, and particularly as at this point in our city's juncture, capital funding is particularly important. As you know, we've got some very big capital demands over the next few years, and in fact, this coming July, we're going to be issuing a $50 million bond offering to support our capital budget. Now, we didn't have our AAA rating. Instead, we had one of the ratings that one of our other cities in Connecticut had. That difference would cost us about $3 million over the 20-year life of bonds. That may not seem a lot. Actually, that's over 20 years, except that we have another $50 million bond offering still next year. So that's another $3 million. In essence, it's $3 million a year simply because that we save simply because we have our financial house in order. And $3 million, to put that in another perspective, that's about 20 cops, plus or minus. That's real difference. And with this solid credit rating, not only are we keeping our costs for bonding capital projects low, but it enables us to do other important things. So, for instance, this year we refinanced the Mill River TIF bonds. That saved us about $17 million in interest payments. Now, it doesn't save us interest payments this coming year or in year 2. What happens is that we aren't going to save very much for the 20 years of the refinancing. But what we did is we completely eliminated the payments that previously were in 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. I think we'd already done 2 years. So we eliminated 8 years. Now, it's a lot in the long, it's out there in the future, but I don't think I need to explain, and any homeowner certainly understands. If you've got a 30-year mortgage, you paid a couple of years, and you can refinance it in a way that you pay the same or less in every single year and just eliminate all the payments after 20 years. That's what we did. And we got some criticism for that, believe it or not. It's $17 million, and it sets us up for a stronger financial future. It is sometimes, I don't know, appealing is not the word I want to use, but sometimes politicians and councils and state and legislatures are seduced into relaxing their standards when they're faced with high capital needs. And we are not going to do that. And so what am I talking about? Well, one of the things is that we do not use bond premium. I'm going to get a little technical with bankers and all. We do not use bond premiums to support operating revenues, operating expenses. Bond premiums are used for capital. When we refinance, as I just explained earlier, we are not going to refinance in a way that artificially front-load the savings, so that you get a current year savings that you leave in long-term obligations the same or sometimes even higher. And we are not going to use 20-year bonding, long-term bonds, to support short-term projects. Now, whether it's a fire truck or a computer system or some of the other short-term capital needs, we're not using 20-year money for that. We have a very sound, one might argue a conservative capital approach, but in the long run, what I've been faced is we're paying down capital obligations without the services or the things that we bought long ago, but we're still sitting here with capital, with bonding obligations, and I don't want to leave that for my successor. We also are going to have to pay down the unfunded liabilities left from before. Basically, we're finally going to get serious about paying down these past unfunded obligations. And Stamford is better than most. Better than most is not good enough. And I am committed to honoring those obligations. And I'm not going to kick the can down the road, as we often see a lot of politicians or governments do. In fact, during my term, we will spend more money to pay down unfunded pension obligations than in any previous 4-year period in the history of Stamford. And we will spend more money during my term to pay down unfunded retiree health care coverage than all prior mayors combined since the beginning of Stamford. Our pension funds are in the neighborhood of 85 to low 90% funded. But our health care is funded at only about a 15% level. We've got a long way to go. Next year, for the first time in the history of Stamford, we plan to set aside our full ARC contribution. Again, a little technical, but that is called the actuarially required contribution in order to cover your long-term obligations over a 15-year period. And that is both for the unfunded pension obligations as well as the unfunded retiree health care. And we're required to set aside more than before to pay down those previously funded obligations. What's happening is as we do this, those payments, in terms of the city side of the budget, the total budget's around $500 million, the city side's around $250 million. So on the city side, we're now spending 15.8% of our budget just to deal with unfunded benefit obligations from the past. That number has been climbing, as you can see, consistently. It's going to climb again a little bit more. This is unsustainable. I don't think I need to explain that. 15% of your city's tax dollar is going to pay off obligations from before that are just unfunded obligations. I'm going to stop it. We're going to halt this thing, and that is my objective. Within 1 or 2 years, to halt that trend by the things that we're doing today. In addition to paying down our unfunded liabilities, we're going to get our current costs under control. That's, the health care and defined benefit costs continue to rise here and across the country. They are also growing faster than we can sustain. And we are working to negotiate more sustainable contracts with our employees to make the contracts more sustainable. Because it isn't just that these obligations leave a financial hole for the city. It is that they get to the point where you can't even be certain that the city will ultimately pay those pensions and ultimately pay those healthcare obligations, as we see in counties and municipalities across this great country. So that's the goal. We've implemented measures to help us better manage our resources, but I'm going to say one thing first. We actually are getting some support from the unions. They begin to recognize the importance of the sustainability. And this last year we obtained a contract that, to the best of our knowledge, is the first time ever in the history of the state of Connecticut where current employees, not just new employees, but current employees, have reduced the amount that they are accumulating pension coverage. Anyway, we also need to do other things to implement measures to manage our resources. Some of these things we brought in last year as we put in AVL for our heavy highway equipment. AVL automatic vehicle locators, so during those snowstorms, we could track where the equipment was. And yes, some of that is management of employees, but some of that is just to know, well, it looks like this guy's route is done. This route still needs to be completed, and we redeploy resources. And we believe we got a great return in our first year, and we're still working the kinks out of that. Some changes are like the implementation of Chronos timekeeping system. That's not a Chronos timekeeping system within our public safety employees, who previously were doing their own timekeeping separately from the rest of the city. Some of these things are to changes in the way we're going to track benefit policies, which is an audit that we're currently underway. But not all the solutions that I talk about are high-tech and systems. Some of them are just some common sense low-tech things you have to do. Last year I talked about potholes after what was then one of the worst winters on record. We've managed to surpass that with now the coldest February ever. But one of the things that we did is we put in a couple of hot box equipment. This is not a high-cost item. It's not high-tech. What does it enable us to do? It enables us to put hot asphalt into potholes in the middle of the winter. As a result, it reduces the cost of filling a pothole during December, January, February, and March by about 40%. And it ends up with better pothole filling. During the summer, it also helps, but the savings are only about 10% because we have hot asphalt available. When asphalt plants are closed, we actually do want hot asphalt put in those things. Not the biggest deal in the world, but it's part of a continuing attack to try to get better control of our costs. We're also beginning to re-engineer our budget format. The city of Stamford, despite the fact that we are recognized as a leader across this country, across the state, is in fact well behind in the way that we do our budgeting and budgeting format, and we basically made no progress in 20 years. So we're working on that, and it's a multi-year project, and there's a lot of people that want to keep doing things the old way, but we're beginning to address that. One of the most important things is that we're trying to move, and it's hard to do, but we're trying to move to what I call program-based budgeting. So before, you would say, I'm budgeting for a police department. The police department has several different components. There is the crossing guards, there is the patrol division, there's investigations, there's youth. And the point is, from a program perspective, these are different components. Rather than just looking at the big blob, we're trying to break it down into components and see those program expenses. This year we piloted the redesign of the fire department, the IT, and the solid waste areas. We plan to roll it out to additional departments next year, and I will be first to admit, while we've made progress, there's a lot more to do, and not everyone on our Board of Finance and not everyone on our Board of Representatives fully appreciates what we're trying to do. But let me turn from the financially responsible, the financially strong city are, and talk a little bit about public safety, which is clearly one of our highest priorities. We continue to have the distinction of being the safest city in New England. That's truly remarkable. Crime is the lowest level it has been over the past 20 years. And despite a few high-profile recent situations, crime remains low and even continues to trend downward in some of the internal metrics that we're beginning to track as part of our review. This is actually the federally approved statistics which you see, where our internal statistics show that crime continues to trend downward, but we've gotten it at such a low level it's hard to beat it anymore. And I must tell you, I get chagrined sometimes when I read in the Advocate, because I know the Stamford Times would never do this, right? So sometimes I read in the Advocate letters to the editor or columnists offering advice on how we should manage our police based upon cities whose crime rate is more than double the city of Stamford. That just seems a little bit bizarre. So what are we doing here in the last year? Well, interestingly enough, we have doubled our presence in the schools. Now, in the recent things that we've seen here, you kind of would miss this, but if you recall, it wasn't just a couple of years ago that we had a major catastrophe at Newtown. And our police have responded, and basically the police aren't in there patrolling the halls, but they stop and visit the schools almost every day, sit in the parking lots, and fill out the reports rather than other places. And as a result, the amount of time, the amount of visits that have been done at the schools, and they are largely on the outside, has doubled since last year. We are expanding foot patrols. And for those of you who are concerned about the downtown, and we certainly are, yes, we have foot patrols in downtown Stamford and trying to continue that for some time. We are cracking down on distracted driving. That's our Sergeant Gallagher, who is frustrated by how easy it is for him to get tickets issued when people are driving around Stamford. I think I have the statistics later, but we're issuing hundreds of tickets for distracted driving, because that is, other than drunk driving, is probably the thing that is most responsible for accidents. And I've got to say that when crime occurs, our police department does not stop until they finish the job. And the chief is unable to be with us, but Assistant Chief Shaw, could you just stand up for just a moment? And if there's any other police officers here today, thank you for the great job. Now, being the best doesn't happen by chance. It does happen from that incredible leadership, and I have to be somewhat careful how I say this, but I think we all understand that in the last couple of months, we've had a national discussion about how do you police the police, how do they interact with us. And that discussion continues. We were watching the news this morning, elements about what's going on in Baltimore. In Stamford, during some of this most disturbing time, head of the NAACP asked our police headquarters and shook the hand. I'm not saying that we're not going to have our incidents, but a hell of a job, extremely good person, and they put their lives in the line for it. So again. But we can't rest on the laurels. The world keeps changing, and we've got to keep changing to stay ahead. Today, as you probably have been aware, I'm prepared to make the investments necessary to keep us ahead. One of the most important and one of the clearly biggest ones, we're investing in the police headquarters. Shortly after taking office, while I was aware that we had some issues at the police department building and we would probably need to do a replacement, we were suddenly confronted with asbestos raining down from the ceiling. This was a final signal. Time had come for the city to finally take this seriously, an investment in the police facility, and stop doing cash repairs that cost millions of dollars for a sinking money into the lab. We've been working with Connecticut OSHA to ensure that our officers are safe. We've just got a report back, I think within the last 48 hours, of recent air testing, including air testing. It's absolutely clean. But we still have to take action to fix that. I was proud to announce in February our plans to build a new police department headquarters, and after review of dozens of sites, we in fact are going to keep it roughly where it is now. As you can see, the existing police building is in the upper left-hand corner. The parking lot and part of the state courthouse parking lot there to its immediate right. And the hatched area, half of that is the current police garage, and the other half is a property that flooding house that we currently have before the courts to approve the purchase of that property. And then just north of that is where the historic White Barn House is. This plan has been yet far more it's been received well, let's put it that way. And we have some concerns about moving that house, and I pledge you that we're going to make certain that house is preserved. And I would go so far as to even say that the house, while this may be close or on its original location, it's no longer in the environment that Stamford was in 1699, and I think it's really lost its meaning. Our plans are to preserve this home, move it up to the Historical Society, more than likely, and hopefully it will actually become a better resource for education, employment up there, the Historical Society, and I think they'll actually do more in this particular house and save this property for the police department. The new police department is going to enable the department to centralize their operations and work in a modern facility, obviously. Just within the last 24 hours, we decided on an architect. So I think this is the announcement. Michael Handler doesn't wave me off. Cummings and Cummings, did I pronounce that correctly? They have designed the police departments across the strait, including the recent buildings in Darien, Danbury, and New Haven. So we're preparing a contract for that shortly. And I'd like to say that over the last year and the next couple of years, the city of Stamford is doing more financial engineering. Not only financial engineering like bricks and coal, I mean financial engineering in terms of the size of bond offerings we're putting out, the refinancing that we're doing, credit calls, and the deals that we're working through to get us the best possible projects, the lowest capital projects, both at Strawberry Hill, the new school, as well as these buildings. And Michael Handler has been leading the charge, and he's been doing a terrific job. And I don't know if he'll stand up because he's recently had back surgery, but nonetheless, I think we got to give him a great job. Modern police building is part of our plans, and it's only a part. We're going to begin investing more in technology to equip us to better respond to incidents. I mentioned AVL, automatic vehicle locators, that we put in our heavy highways equipment. We are in the process of putting that into our public safety vehicles for real-time tracking. We already have that in our fire equipment and our ambulances. We're going to begin turning that on for the police department as well. We are planning for surveillance cameras to help prevent crime and identify criminals when crimes do occur. And we're doing this within the strict requirements of the local ordinance. It's far more prescriptive than what it can and cannot do. We, in fact, have already started using surveillance cameras. In our first cases, a camera that we put up on Stevens Street to deal with the fact that we were getting illegal dumping on that street almost every week. And sure enough, the two gentlemen who were stopping here at roughly 3 in the morning with a couch for deposit on Stevens Street have subsequently been arrested by the police department, and for those of you who are driving around with trash in the back that you're dumping off, we actually have 7 other secret locations where we can put up cameras, so let the word get out there, okay? More importantly, we are moving to introduce surveillance cameras at other locations. We actually have several other locations approved or in process of being approved. Some of the ones that we're doing first are in Mill River Park. I am particularly, for instance, concerned that we have surveillance cameras in the playground, and we are now working on cameras in the DSSD area. Police aren't the only things that we can be proud of. Our emergency services organization, SIMS, is basically the best there is. It is the only nationally accredited ambulance service in Connecticut. The only one in Connecticut accredited at that level. They offer the highest level of pre-hospital emergency care, and they're staffed every time by at least one Connecticut licensed paramedic. While SIMS is the best, we want to do better. So we are striving to get faster initial life-saving care to victims of heart attacks even before the ambulance can arrive. So in cooperation with Dr. Nero, SIMS, Stamford Hospital, and Stamford Public Schools, we are planning Hands for Life 2015, this coming September at West Hill High School. A couple of years ago, we did this at Chelsea Piers. This year, the event has been bigger. In fact, it's going to be a full week, and we are in fact trying to train middle school and high school students with the goal of over 10,000 people being trained. I know that the first selectmen of Greenwich and Darien are now going to start coming to Stamford to celebrate this event. I'm sure the first selectmen have a chance. Even as we improve emergency care, staying healthy to begin with is a good thing too. So what's the number one killer in America? Cigarette smoke. And in fact, even secondary cigarette smoke is attributed to roughly 50,000 deaths and injuries a year. So, in Stamford, we're moving to ban smoking in our public parks. Now, that's not our public parks. I think that's Red Rocks back there. But nonetheless, I'm going to get them. So, enjoy our beaches, but don't put your cigarette butts in the sand and blow smoke on your neighbors. And I want to finish up on the safety area by talking about our fire service. We talk so much about other things, but they are second to none. And very importantly, we're making progress on an issue that has been here in Stamford for over 20 years, and that is the integration of volunteer professional fire. So we continue to work towards combination departments. We've had a lot of bumps in the road, and there's a lot of bumps in the roads. It's a slow progress that come over 20 years. But these are pictures of TOR, Turner River Volunteer Stations 1 and 2. In the last 2 months, we have moved our professional fire engines, and they are now coming out of those 2 stations. We are working on that plan slowly but steadily, which requires an incredible amount of effort. And I would just like our Chief Brown and Assistant Chief Roach, if we could stand for just a minute. If you live in North Stamford, you're going to end up with better fire protection. And we're not spending a lot of money to do it. This has been an incredible effort. Just one decision that was required 200 hours on the head of our human resources to get one small decision. It's been important to make progress. Having a city that's safe and financially sound is absolutely necessary, but it is only a means to an end. The end is, what is it like to live here? And is it fun? Ultimately, all of this supports our agenda to support a high quality of life for our residents. So first of all, public education. A successful city will empower the success of its public schools, along with public safety. Providing quality public education to our children is one of our core missions. The mayor's role, I think, as many of you know, is very limited, but I have taken that to be a priority of what I am able to do. And so I am investing in our infrastructure, which we know about in Strawberry Hill, which we announced previously, which I think I'm going to say again in about 2 minutes. But also I am regularly attending Board of Education meetings to increase the communication between the city and the Board of Ed, particularly in non-early educational support issues where the city plays an important role. And for the first time, I have a special assistant dedicated to education affairs. In the past year, we did complete the purchase of 200 Strawberry Hill Avenue at the former Sacred Heart Academy, and applied to make it an inter-district magnet school, and the signs that we read from Hartford still look very, very positive on that, despite the challenges in Hartford. The school will not only help in addressing our growing student population, but I think we have this opportunity to preserve a landmark in Stamford that is the educational place for so many of our residents. Recently, we secured an architect for this project, Perkins Eastman. In addition to numerous school construction projects completed in the state, they recently completed 2 new K-5 schools in Connecticut. So we're moving ahead with that project with the objective of opening the initial opening of the school for fall of 2016, so a year. And that is one heck of a tight schedule. It has also been a priority of mine to advocate for additional state funding for ECS, Educational Cost Sharing. I and many others that live in Stamford and many others in the state have recognized that Stamford is getting the raw end of the deal in terms of ECS funding. Yes, we have a high grant list, but we have so many other characteristics of need and median income that suggest that we should be getting more. As recently as within the last couple of weeks, I was at Hartford and I was testifying on behalf of ECS. Not just whining as somebody else does, but beginning to talk about facts and statistics to show why it is that we need that additional funding and how our situation is in fact similar to other communities in Connecticut. Anybody that knows me knows that I'm not afraid to share data and information. I believe that this persistence on this issue has begun to help build momentum to changes. It's not going to be an easy task. It's going to take a long time. But subsequent to my testimony in Hartford a couple weeks ago, where you were supposed to have a 3-minute limit, and I in fact had 25 minutes of testimony after all the questions that were asked, there is amendments being proposed that actually increase the ECS money in a way that would be above the level that was proposed in the governor's budget. They have a state spending cap that they have to deal with, so I wouldn't get my hopes up too much, but we're trying to make progress. That was a good sign. We've got a long way to go. We also announced last year the Stamford Street Smart Initiative. It is clear that we can do better with our roads from a safety standpoint, from a flow standpoint, from a pedestrian and bicycle standpoint. We need to get better. We're going to do that. We talked about enforcement previously and distracted driving. We've run a couple of campaigns. In the current campaign, which is still underway, we've already issued over 450 tickets. The vast majority of those are texting to cell phone. If you're driving, don't do it. We passed a complete streets ordinance. Complete streets ordinance, though, is not complete without some funding or additional resources to make it happen. We'll talk about it in a second. But I also have proposed synchronization of our traffic lights. We sometimes joke that our traffic lights are perfectly synchronized. You get a red light every stop. We need to change that, and that's the plan. And Stamford has about 205 intersections, and the actual signals themselves, there's somewhere close to 1,200 different signals in those intersections. That's a lot to work with, and we currently have one city engineer. No wonder we're having trouble. Fortunately, we put some money in our capital budget, and so far it's been approved by the Board of Finance. But just last week, I was attending a meeting of the West COG, that is the West Council of Governments, which is something the state is beginning to do, and also at the SWRPA MPO. We got agreement from both the West COG and SWRPA that they would recommend that Stamford receive state funding for this project, and in fact, they recommended it as the #1 project in the region for federal CMAQ funding, an indication of the importance of this, the importance of Stamford, even to them. If you think about it, this is not all about selfishness. It isn't just us that gets slowed down in the streets, it's the drivers from Derry and Weston and all those others. When I talked about resources, I said we had one traffic engineer, and not only that, we had scattered our transportation department across 3 different other departments. So I am consolidating the transportation functions under a new position, and provided funding in this new budget for a bureau chief for transportation, traffic, and parking, as well as a transportation planner. So far, that funding has been approved, and we have in fact received resumes for that position. I'm not going to hire somebody just to fill a position, but it looks like we have a few candidates, the type of leaders that we need to change this direction. We continue, and I guess, we're going long here, so I'm going to speed up a little bit. We continue to have the vitality of a great downtown, working to improve our recreation marketplaces. And if you think about it, the way I view Stamford, yes, it's always been a great city, but when the downtown special services district started getting going years ago, Sandy Goldstein became the director of or the executive director or president or chairman goddess of the DSSD, it started to change. And it is now, if you will, been the seed that has blossomed into the core of what is beautiful about Stamford, whether it's the balloon parade or a Live at 5. We are planning something this summer, which is new. I call it Slip and Slide. I know that's not the right title, but bring your bathing suit and we'll be going down Prospect Street, is it August? Something like that. July, when it's hot. Something new and different. We all know about Mill River Park, which has turned out to be beautiful. And incidentally, the cherry trees right now are beautiful. It almost makes me want to go buy a place at the Trump Tower right next door so that I can see the beauty of the cherry trees. You drive down Washington Boulevard and you get a chance. They are terrific. You know, the cherry tree blooms don't last long. It is absolutely fabulous. And Mill River Park is on its way to do the groundbreaking for the carousel. Plans are to break ground on that carousel this fall. We are also working on a Cummings and West Beach master plan. It is currently under development. I don't have the diagram here because I pulled it together quickly, but I got to tell you, it looks terrific. I'm very pleased with the work that's been done in that area. We're also working on improvements in Leone Park in conjunction with the Boys and Girls Club. Not only to help the Boys and Girls Club, but to help that park itself, both in terms of the services that are available there as well as the safety of that park. And yes, come July, we will be celebrating our independence of this country with fireworks. We're not going to threaten closure of fireworks this year. We actually are thinking about a second fireworks celebration for later in the summer, but we haven't finalized those plans yet. So let's just talk a little bit about the future and where we're headed. We all know that we are now the third largest city in the state. We are growing. Stamford's economy continues to lead our state and is the envy of other cities in Connecticut. In fact, other cities in the whole tri-state area. We are growing, as I mentioned before, and with 126,000 residents now, and continuing to grow with current projections. If they continue the way they've been going, we will be the second largest city in the state in about 2017. Where is a lot of that growth coming from? Well, it's coming from the South End and the downtown, some residential projects. And in fact, in these areas, we have $6 billion in projects with 15,000 new people expected to live in these areas, essentially doubling the existing population of these areas. And of course, this one is showing all the businesses that are located in the South End just to make the DSSD people a little bit jealous. But nonetheless, we're making terrific progress, and we continue to make terrific progress. But I want to make a point here. This growth is not for growth's sake. I don't have an objective that we have to be the second largest or first largest. I have an objective is making us the best city in the state of Connecticut where people want to come to live. If you make us the best, we're going to have population growth because people want to come and live here. It's as simple as that. And we've got to make that growth smart and sustainable because we do have our neighborhood protected. We will protect those neighborhoods even as we grow the areas of downtown and South End. Now, those people that are coming here because it's a great city, they also need job opportunities, and certainly that's a piece of that. I don't need to tell you, Stamford was hard hit by the recession, in particular because we are heavily in financial services and in particular international banks. We're very hard hit by the recession. But despite that, we continue to be an attractive destination for business, some of which you see here. Some of these are new, but it's a busy slide. A lot of you guys are part of this. Stamford continues to be ahead of the state and the nation in terms of employment. The nation's picked up a little bit. As you can see, we're doing fine. And I can't go into details, but I am optimistic that we're going to hear some positive news over the next few months. And we're all going to be welcome to hear. I have been reaching out to businesses that are here in order to develop more of a relationship between City Hall and businesses in order that we can be successful. And one of the things that we've learned from these meetings is that the city needs to do a better job of marketing itself. So we're putting together an information packet about the city of Stamford as part of a marketing campaign, and we put money into this year's Economic Development Department budget in addressing some of those issues. We're also beginning to look at our internal processes. And what I'm talking about is the timeline to get site approvals, the timeline to get building departments. My goal, put simply, is to improve that cycle time for approval success, plan submission, zoning approval, and permit applications. What you may have also heard about is that we are a leader in the Gigabit City initiative. We're proud to be one of the leaders, I would say this is one of the first things that Thomas Madden did when he got on board as something of this. They were kind of surprised when they called Stamford that there were a few beginning communities that say, would Stamford be interested? And we just said yes, and immediately created the critical mass to make this go forward. We've got 11 private sector businesses and industry representatives, including 2 international investment banks that have put together file responses and RFP to basically provide gigabit services throughout these communities. Pushing forward in this project, we don't know exactly where it's going to end up, but basically this open access model that we're talking about is necessary for the future economic success of any place. For 10,000 years, the success of communities have depended upon transportation networks. And that still is important. But in the digital age, transportation is not just the movement of people and goods. It is also now the movement of information. And we've got to be there, and that's why we're leading this particular cause. This doesn't pay off in a year. This is the long-term future of Stamford. We're going to be there. They're also participating in a 2030 Energy Improvement District project with the Business Council of Fairfield and private building owners in Stamford. We're trying to make our commercial areas a sustainable area. This is just the 6th 2030 district in the nation. We've got a long way to go in here, but we are at the forefront of a movement of making private sector pioneers coming together to reduce energy consumption, water use, and transportation emissions. Our own Energy Improvement District is being revised and expanded, and we are currently working with vendor to evaluate our buildings as well as private sector buildings, to evaluate their energy efficiency and to set priorities for capital investments designed to get a return on investment for all state energy. By partnering together, we think we can protect our community from the events that happen when the storms come, safeguard the local economy with respect to making our city more resilient to the effects of storms and sea level rising. As I said, that history of mankind, its transportation, it's still transportation. In these discussions with local executives, this is probably the single most critical issue, is how well is our transportation infrastructure in Fairfield County. It's not just Stamford, it is all of local Fairfield County. That's particularly in Metro North. The effective rail infrastructure is a keystone to making the region stronger, provides economic benefits such as better accessibility to markets, employment, and increased investment. The Metro North line that we depend upon was built in the 1840s to 1870s before the Civil War. And believe it or not, some of that original infrastructure is still in use today. And unfortunately, some of it is beginning to get a little bit weak. We want to avoid this, which is in fact what happened about 100 years ago on that line. So it's not this, it's something better. We talk about a variety of issues about services, and the reality is that we all know we need higher reliability, and we know it can be done. We need higher frequency, and we know it can be done, and of course we need safety. It is not just that we have local residents who want to commute to New York City or Westchester County or other destinations. Stamford is now a net inbound city. More people come into Stamford than leave. And so when I refer to Manhattan as being one of our suburbs, you now know why. We in fact need this train station both for the convenience and enjoyment of our commuters, but we also need it for economic viability. Projections show that ridership on the New Haven line will increase by nearly 50% in the next 15 years. And basically, we need to plan ahead. Plan for what we've got now is not good enough. We need plans for where we're going to be in 2025 and 2030. And without that, we're going to be in trouble. We're seeing progress across the board. And while people might have missed this, there's recently been announced a proposed new Metro North route that would actually connect the Metro North line that we are familiar with that goes down to Grand Central, would connect it with reasonable service, high-speed service to Penn Station. And fundamentally increasing the importance and the accessibility of both employees to come to Stamford as well as Stamford to go to other locations. So this announcement that they have these efforts are underway in New York actually benefits Stamford. And it's a pleasure to see they're beginning to take a focus on that. Then the state of Connecticut, because we all know the Governor Malloy has recently announced he's going to make transportation a focus. And at the opening speech that he gave to the legislature, for all the things we talked about, his speech was only about transportation. Some of this we talk about is, gee, we want to reduce travel time on I-95 or the Merritt or the other locations. That's all good. But this is fundamentally probably the most important thing the state can do to ensure the economic prosperity of the state and certainly Fairfield County. We sorely need this achievement to make us have it for us a 21st century transportation system, Metro North as well as the station. So I know I've been long, but let me just conclude. It's an honor to be serving as your mayor and have the opportunity to work with you to move our city forward. I want to thank one last person, Michael Pollard, my chief of staff. Probably more than anybody else. We're going to continue to focus on these issues. Gee, I'm just going to keep taking on more and more that I think we can get done in terms of maintaining our safety, keeping us financially sound, continuing our livability, and having a vision of smart growth for the future. It's a great city, a tremendous diversity of people that I am very proud of, and cultures, our neighborhood, the vitality of our corporate community, our schools, our municipal workers, the natural beauty, whether you live in the woods or whether you live in the center. This is fundamentally